Welcome back to Apex Sci-Fi. In space there is no stealth. This is a fundamental rule of physics. You can paint your ship black to hide from visual sensors. You can use radar-absorbent materials to hide from LiDAR. But you cannot hide your heat. A spaceship is a machine. It generates power. Power generates heat. And against the cold background of the universe, which is near absolute zero, a warm ship shines like a flare. To an infrared sensor, you are a beacon screaming, "I am here." So, how do you hide? The Zenari Empire thought it was impossible. They built their fleet around thermal tracking. They hunted humans like sharks hunting warm blood. But they forgot that humans evolved on a planet with deserts, jungles, and volcanoes. They forgot that we are masters of endurance. And they didn't know about the heat sink maneuver. A tactic where the crew shuts down the cooling systems, seals the ship like a thermos, and slowly cooks themselves alive just to get the perfect shot. If you can handle the heat, smash that like button. If you want to know why the scariest sound in space is the drip of sweat on a metal deck, subscribe and turn on notifications. Temperature rising. Cooling offline. The Zenari hunter-killer Eye of the Void drifted silently through the asteroid field of Sector 88. Its design was predatory. A long, needle-like hull covered in sensor arrays. Along its spine were massive, glowing fins, radiators. In space, getting rid of heat is the hardest engineering challenge. The Zenari radiators glowed a dull cherry red, venting the waste heat of their fusion reactor into the dark. Commander Xylth stood at the sensor station. His reptilian eyes scanned the thermal readouts. Sector clear, the sensor drone clicked. Background radiation nominal. No heat spikes. No engine plumes. The humans are not here. Xylth hissed in frustration. They were tracked to this sector. A heavy cruiser. The UNS Purgatory. A ship that size cannot simply vanish. It generates gigawatts of energy. It should be lighting up our scopes like a supernova. Perhaps they are behind an asteroid? Asteroids absorb heat, they do not mask it completely. If they were running their engines we would see the plume. If they were running life support we would see the vent exhaust. They are gone. Xylth turned away. Set course for the mining colony. If we cannot find the warship we will burn their civilians. That usually draws them out. The Eye of the Void turned its engines. The massive radiators flared brighter as the reactor spooled up. They didn't notice the large, dark, metallic shape drifting just 2 kilometers away, nestled in the shadow of a nickel-iron asteroid. To their sensors it was just a rock. It was exactly the same temperature as the rock. But inside the rock, it was hell. Inside the UNS Purgatory, the temperature was 52 degrees Celsius, 125 degrees Fahrenheit. And rising. Captain Elias Thorne sat in his command chair. He was stripped down to his undershirt, which was soaked through with sweat. His hair was plastered to his skull. The bridge was dark. All non-essential systems were killed. The lights were off. The gravity deck was off, leaving them floating in a nauseating zero-G sauna. The air recyclers were running on minimum power, just enough to stop CO2 poisoning but not enough to cool the air. Core temperature at 92% capacity, whispered Lieutenant Sarah Chin. Her voice was raspy. Her lips were cracked from dehydration. She wiped a bead of sweat from her eyebrow before it could float into her eye. Captain, the heat sinks are almost full. The hull plating is starting to expand. We're going to start popping rivets soon. Hold, Thorne croaked. He took a sip of lukewarm water from a sealed pouch. Not yet. They're turning. The heat sink maneuver was a gamble with thermodynamics. The ship was lined with tanks of superfluid helium and phase change wax. Instead of venting heat into space, which the aliens would see, the Purgatory dumped all its heat into itself. Into these tanks. It was like holding your breath underwater. You can do it for a while. But eventually your lungs burn. Eventually you have to exhale. And right now, the Purgatory was holding its breath until its face turned purple. Internal temp 55 degrees, the medical officer murmured over the comms. Captain, we have 3 crew members down with heat stroke in engineering. If we don't vent in 10 minutes, we're looking at permanent brain damage for the bridge crew. Thorne looked at the tactical display, a passive, low-power screen shielded by a hood. The Zenari ship was turning. It was exposing its flank. But it wasn't perfect yet. The Zenari radiators were facing away. 5 minutes, Thorne said. Give me 5 minutes. The silence on the bridge was heavy. The only sound was the wet, ragged breathing of the crew and the creaking of the ship's metal as it swelled from the internal heat. It felt like being cooked in a slow cooker. The air was thick, heavy, and tasted of hot metal and human misery. Every instinct screamed at them to open the vents, to let the cold vacuum of space rush in, to cool the ship. But opening the vents meant death. The moment they vented, the purgatory would bloom on the alien sensors like a flare. The Zenari would fire their plasma lances and the game would be over. "They are accelerating," Shin whispered. "They are heading for the colony." Thorn watched the blip. The Zenari ship rotated. Its massive, glowing radiators, the only way it kept itself from melting, swung into view. To a thermal-seeking missile, those radiators were a bullseye. "Target lock," Thorn rasped. "Passive only. Don't paint them with LiDAR." "Locked," Weapons Officer Miller groaned. He looked like he was about to pass out. His hands were shaking on the console. Missile tubes 1 through 4 flooded. Warheads armed. The heat alarm triggered. A soft, blinking red light. "Warning, heat sink capacity 98%. Critical failure imminent. Automatic venting in 60 seconds. Override auto vent," Thorn ordered. "Sir?" "Override it. If we vent now, we miss the shot." Miller keyed the command. "Override confirmed. Safety's disabled. We are cooking the reactor, sir." The temperature climbed to 60 degrees Celsius, 140 F. Thorn's vision began to tunnel. His heart hammered against his ribs, trying to pump thick, overheated blood to his brain. "Just a little more. Show me your throat." On the eye of the void, Commander Xwelch paused. His sensors picked up a ghost. A shimmer. Anomaly, the drone clicked. Sector 4. A gravitational distortion. Very faint. Xwelch narrowed his eyes. "Turn the ship. Scan that rock again." The Zenari ship began to rotate back towards the asteroid. Towards the Purgatory. This was it. They were looking right at them. But by turning, the Zenari ship aligned its radiators perfectly with the Purgatory's launch tubes. "Now," Thorn whispered. "Exhale. Venting heat." Chin screamed, slamming the emergency release lever. "Firing missiles." Miller punched the button. The UNS Purgatory screamed. Massive vents along the hull blasted open. A cloud of superheated steam and coolant exploded into the vacuum. To the Zenari sensors, it looked like a star had just been born in the shadow of the asteroid. The thermal signature went from 0 to 1,000,000,000 in a microsecond. "Contact!" Xwelch screamed. "Thermal spike. It's right there." But the heat wasn't just waste. It was camouflage for the launch. Hidden within the cloud of venting steam, 4 Adder heat-seeking missiles streaked out. The Zenari point defense lasers tried to lock on. But the cloud of superheated gas blinded them. The missiles were invisible in the thermal chaos. They flew straight and true. They ignored the Zenari hull. They ignored the engines. They went for the heat. They went for the radiators. Impact. The missiles slammed into the glowing red fins of the Eye of the Void. The explosions shattered the Zenari cooling system. Flash coolant sprayed into space, freezing instantly. The radiators were sheared off. Commander Xwelch watched his board turn red. Cooling system failure. Reactor temperature critical. Emergency scram. Xwelch yelled. "Shut down the core." "I can't," the engineer shrieked. "The control links are melted. The waste heat is backing up into the ship." The Zenari ship didn't explode from the missiles. It died from its own power. Without radiators, a fusion drive is a bomb. The heat built up in seconds. The hull plates buckled. The atmosphere inside the alien ship flash-boiled. The Eye of the Void turned into a glowing white ember, cooking its crew in an instant before finally detonating in a silent puff of plasma. On the Purgatory, the relief was physical. The venting system roared, dumping the stored heat into space. The temperature on the bridge dropped rapidly. 50 degrees, 40 degrees, 30 degrees. Cool, fresh air began to cycle from the reserve tanks. Thorn slumped in his chair, gasping, drinking in the cold air like it was fine wine. "Target destroyed," Miller whispered, his head resting on the console. "We got him." "Status of the crew?" Thorn asked, his voice weak. "Medbay is full," the doc reported. "Lots of second-degree burns. Severe dehydration. But no fatalities. We're alive, Captain." Thorn nodded. He looked at his arm. The skin was red, blistering slightly. He looked at the view screen where the wreckage of the superior alien ship drifted. They had better shields. They had better guns. They had better sensors. But they couldn't take the heat. "Get the cooling system back online," Thorn ordered. "And someone get me a cold drink. With ice. Lots of ice." The heat sink tactic became a standard, if dangerous, maneuver in the Terran Navy. Alien empires learned to fear the cold ships. They learned that humans were willing to push their bodies to the absolute biological limit just to gain a tactical advantage. We turned our biology into a weapon. We turned our suffering into stealth. It turns out, the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't a laser or a nuke. It's a human being who is willing to sit in the fire and wait. This has been Apex Sci-Fi. We often complain about the heat in the summer. But at least we aren't in a submarine in space trying to hide from thermal sensors. If you broke a sweat just listening to this story, hit that like button. Comment below. What is the highest temperature you think you could endure to save the world? Subscribe. And stay cool. Venting complete.